So you've been in the series, I understand, on hunger, various hunger, spiritual, physical hunger, all of that, and reflecting on the meaning of that from your faith perspective. So today we're at this place we're going to talk about hunger for heaven. Are you hungry for heaven? And what does that mean in our faith tradition to say, what is heaven all about, really? So have you ever heard a joke about heaven? You know, there are hundreds, probably thousands of humorous jokes about people arriving at the pearly gates, right? So I just read one last week, and it went like this. So 3 guys died on the same day, and they arrived at the pearly gates, and St. Peter met them, and he said, the rules for admission have changed. So he said to them, you have to have had a really, really bad day when you died to get in. So the first guy, he comes and he steps up and he said, well, I had a horrible day, Peter. He said, what happened to me was I got fired from my job in the morning, and on the way home, I kept thinking about, I'm just sure my wife is not faithful to me, and I got to the apartment on our 22nd floor and walked in, and sure enough, there's a guy on the veranda, but he's hanging on to the railing, and I was so ticked off, I went and got a hammer, pounded on his fingers until he let go, and he fell the 22 stories down, but the bushes down there were soft and big, and they caught him. He was okay. So then I went and I got my refrigerator and I pushed it out to the veranda and shoved it over the thing, and bam! And the exertion was too much for me. I had a heart attack and died. Peter said, boy, that's a good story. Come on in. And then the second guy steps up and he says, man, I had a bad day. He said, I was exercising on my 23rd story apartment veranda, and I tripped and I fell over the thing, and I fell down 1 story, and I held onto the railing of that lower apartment, and then some maniac came and started pounding on my fingers, and I fell down, but the bushes caught me, but then he shoved the refrigerator on and killed me. So that's my good story. Come on in. And the third guy steps up and he said, well, you know, I was hiding in this refrigerator. It's pretty funny, really. And most jokes about heaven are kind of funny. But the thing is, their theology is horrendous. So they get it all wrong. They think, well, the question is, how do I get into heaven? And then the God is going to look at our life and how we did, how good we were, or how bad we were, or how we messed up, or how much we suffered here to make up, whatever. That whole thing is just not right. The real question is how heaven gets to us and how we receive it. And are we really receptive to the incredible gifts of the kingdom of heaven, Jesus called it. And the first reading that you heard is a great story for this. It's the story of Jacob. How many of you have heard this story? Jacob's ladder. Some of you may be saying that in camp sometime. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. And then every rung goes higher, higher. Well, that's lousy, really, faith thinking, because it's not really about us climbing up somehow to God. And the story of Jacob explains that, because he was really in a desperate spot. So he had just swindled his twin brother Esau out of his inheritance. And Esau wasn't happy. He was so angry with Jacob that he swore that I'm going to kill him. And so Jacob took off, hightailing it into the wilderness in order to escape that. And he's racing for his life, literally. And then I'm sure he's got to be feeling some shame and some guilt about what he did to his brother, but also tremendous fear about that he could die out there. Exhausted, he drops to sleep on a rock. That's how tired he was. And he has this magnificent dream. And it's like the heavens open up and a staircase comes down. And on it are all these angels, which are symbols of the presence of God. And they're coming down right to where Jacob is. And so in his pain and his fear, it's like God wants to get to him with a message. You are beloved to me. You belong to me still, despite what you've done. You're mine. And I'm with you right here where you are. I always have been. I will be. And I have a future for you. In fact, I want to use your life for some great and amazing things. Heaven coming down. He was so overwhelmed with the experience. He said, we're going to call this place the gate to heaven. So are you hungry for heaven? Have you ever experienced a place or an event that said, wow, I get it. This is the gate of heaven. Come to me. I hope so. Jesus, in the gospel reading for today, is getting right at this point. The point is about readiness. Are you ready for the coming of heaven to your life and through you to the world? So he tells the story of this wedding, right? You just heard it. And you got to remember, weddings in first century Palestine were pretty different from weddings that go on here. And so here it's all about the bride, right? Here comes the bride. That's the whole thing. It's her day. In those days, yes, the bride was important, but the groom, it was really about the groom. And so what they did is the bride in her home with all her friends and stuff, the bridesmaids would be getting ready, beautified for the great celebration and marriage banquet that night and stuff. But they were waiting, and they waited for the groom to come and get them. And it didn't happen until that occurred. And the groom was at his father's house, and festive eating, drinking, having fun, lots of music and instruments and things, and often went on into the night until the bridegroom said, I think it's time. And then they'd make a big procession with their instruments and a lot of noise and shouting, go pick up the bride and take her back for the wedding banquet. That was how they did it. Jesus wanted us to see this is how the kingdom of heaven works. It's like that bridegroom. It comes, but you're not exactly sure when and how. So point is, keep your lamps trimmed and oiled up and burning. So some of those bridesmaids weren't too smart, he said, because they didn't bring enough oil to get through the night. And they missed the moment. And that can happen. So this Bishop Desmond Tutu is from South Africa, was a big part of dismantling apartheid there some years ago. And he wrote this, which captures some thinking of the ancients, really, in our faith. Let's read it together. Each of us has a God-shaped space within us. Only God can fill that space. But we run ourselves ragged trying to find things other than God to fill it with. And so maybe, why didn't those bridesmaids bring enough oil? Maybe because they were just distracted. They had all kinds of other stresses and things going on in their life that didn't allow them enough time or whatever to get themselves ready. And what we're hearing here is that inside of us, there is a space that only heaven fits. There is deep within us, soul, whatever you want to call it, spirit, that is designed only for God to fit. And sometimes what happens, if you're like me, you get your life so crazy busy or involved in anxieties and worries and all sorts of other things that begin to fill that up. And sometimes it's not enough. Or it might be something good that you invest yourself in and your heart and soul into. It can be your family. It could be a person that you become highly dependent upon or too dependent. It could be your whole drive to be successful. Maybe make a lot of money. Okay, good for you. That's great. It could be just about anything. It can be other good things available in nature, in the creation, like alcohol. It's a good thing. Or drugs. Good things provided for our healing and health. Gambling. Well, I don't know. It can be fun if you tried it. But here's my point. You might do those things, but then if you try to put them in the center to take care of your worries, your concerns, your life issues, what's going to happen is you'll never be satisfied. There'll never be enough. They don't fit that space. And so you'll need more of them and more of them and more of them. And it just is relentless and endless. And it's what lays under all the addictions that are going on in our world, in our time, in our society. Because beneath it all, and every 12-step term will get at this really because it's spiritual, so you got to face up to you're not God, and you have a place where you need a higher power at the center. And we in the Christian faith, we know what that is. We come to meet that in this Jesus Christ, which is God's heaven come down to earth in person, right where we are in all our brokenness, our hopelessness and despair and depression and all that stuff. And it's like Jesus is saying is, don't get depressed, get ready. Open your heart for the real kingdom, because peace is coming, life is coming, health is coming, healing is coming, joy is coming. And reconciliation with people is coming. Reconciliation with God, it's all coming through Jesus. So it's a good thing. Just make sure you don't miss the moment. So inside of us, we have this hungry soul. Because in lost paradise, way back at the beginning, we lost that fundamental, natural connection to the source of our life, to the divine. Jesus came to pull it back together again. So inside of us, we need to welcome him in different ways and allow his word of life to feed us with the food of life that really can satisfy, so we're not really hungry again. There's another great theologian, his name is N.T. Wright. Some of you may have read, he's of our time maybe one of the best, but he talks about, the real issue isn't so much about sin. We always talk about it, but that's there, and it's the issue. But the real issue is idolatry. The real issue is getting over-attached to something else and thinking that can define our soul. So we take a look at that. And one way the church does that is providing the season called Lent. And it's not everybody's favorite season. It's a time where people can do some self-inspection and evaluation of their life. They want to take a look at, am I letting all kinds of other things clutter up my inside so that I don't really sense the presence of the kingdom of heaven like I once did or I want to. So Lent gives you a chance to sort of re-up, to repent, to renew, and to get ready. One of the practices and ways of doing that has been fasting. Has anybody here ever fasted, like you gave up a meal, so you gave the money to the poor? Yeah, it's an interesting thing to do. A lot of people today say, I'm going to add something to my life in Lent, and that's not really a great idea. The one thing I worry about is there's so much stuff in here already. How are you really going to get that really inside of you unless you empty out? And Lent allows us to empty out some stuff before God, before the cross, just the way God emptied himself of everything in order to bring heaven to earth to us. So this year I've been fasting. I give up, I fast all sweets of every kind, sugar, stuff like that. And you know what? The first couple of weeks, I'm really crabby. I really miss that stuff. I'm a sweets guy. I love it all. But the cravings are hard. And what I found is a kind of secret key to help me. And it's a simple thing. It's obvious. So when I get that strong hunger craving thing for something like that, I pray for somebody. And you know what? Almost instantly, the craving is gone. I don't understand it, but it works, so I use it. In fact, I went up on Facebook and said, this is what I'm doing for Lent this year. Does anybody need prayer? I'll be glad to pray for you. And so now I'm praying for 65 people every day, but it really helps, and it really opens the gate so that I feel more connection with heaven now, here, already, in this place, in my life. So maybe you find a way to kind of empty something out, a closet or something else in your life, anything that'll put you in touch with your truest hunger, which is for the grace of God in Jesus. We're really talking about keeping your lamps oiled up. Oil represents faith and energy, spirit and God. And so you want to keep that connection oiled up. How you do it is not rocket science. It's simple. It's things like prayer, You just seriously don't say, I'm praying for you. You do it. Or worship, where you come and with the music and with the word, you find yourself being filled again in a way you don't understand. Or you commune at the table of the Lord, and in that intimacy with God, you feel somehow there's a touch of heaven that comes to you. In serving, and this congregation is into service. There's a lot of different ways where people are reaching out, people of all ages, to kind of help others who have the hungry hearts for heaven, so they can sense their belovedness, God's care and gift of heaven for them. So that's important. Heaven is coming. Heaven is real. Get ready. Get ready for it to arrive in your life. If you get demoralized by what's going on in the world or in our country or in Washington or any place else, instead of getting depressed, get ready. Tell yourself, God has a plan. God is working. Heaven is coming. And I want to be part of it. I want to participate in the revival of that heaven until it comes in full, when we are told all of heaven and all of earth get put back together again forever and evermore. That's our great Christian hope. And it leads us to fabulous places. King David was always engaged in defending the land, and he at once had a really fierce enemy, the Philistines. And just west of Jerusalem, there was an assault on Israel, and so King David went to battle them. It looked like the odds were all against them, but they prayed, and bam, they went through. They broke through the enemy lines, and they won a great victory. And at the end, David said this, we're going to call this Baal Perazim, which is Hebrew, and it means, literally, the God of the breakthroughs. We worship a God of the breakthroughs, not often some distant place, but who is breaking into our lives constantly and ever through people that show up just at the right time, through energy that we find in helping somebody else, through tasting the presence of God, until it comes in full. And that's our ultimate hope, this heaven. Some of you may remember Pastor Ted Romberg. Just a few weeks ago, he died in his sleep. Suddenly. It's just shocking to me. He's such a dear friend of mine. We had so much fun together. And they had just come back from Florida. And we talked because we were arranging what we always did, go out for lunch together, and get caught up and support each other and blah, blah, blah. So the next day I was just flabbergasted and slammed by the news that he was gone. In the middle of the night, he had a massive brain bleed suddenly, and he never woke up from that, So, but there's one thing I know about Ted. He lived until he died. He was so full of energy and life and love and being, what he could do to participate in the coming of God's reign for people. He was constantly helping people. And he loved the Lord. He loved worship. In fact, today I brought this along with me because I was blessed to receive from the family this stole, which is Ted's. And it's kind of Christmas, Easter, and everything else all wrapped up into one. And when I wear this, I feel close to the guy. And one thing I know is he was really, really, really ready. He was constantly preparing for the future. He was working, he helped found the Hope Center in Waukesha and was constantly helping people through that. He was visiting me. He had a friend that he constantly stayed with who was in prison, Larry. Nobody else cared about Larry. I don't know what Larry's going to do. He doesn't have a friend now. I don't know him. But Ted is gone from his life. But he was filling Larry's life with hope and being a grace of heaven to Larry. And then I think his name, Theodore, sort of says it all, because that name means adoring God, loving God. And on Sunday morning in his retirement, Ted might go to 2 or 3 services at different churches all around town, just so he could enjoy the worship, the music, the praise, the message. And always he'd come back, oh, it was just wonderful. So I know that he's in victory. I know where he is. And I'm grateful for that, though I miss him. tremendously. You maybe have people you're worried about right now who have gone, and you don't have to sweat them 1 second because we know that they're in the fullness of God. When you come to the communion table, you are communing with Jesus, you are communing with God, you are communing with all who've gone before you who are in heaven. And so I feel at the communion, I'm communing with Ted, with my parents, with their heaven is coming down. We don't want to miss it and take it for granted. Just take it in deeply. I think Ted would tell us too, keep your lamps oiled up and burning, and get eager and hungry for the fullness of God. St. Paul said this at the end of his life, and we're going to wrap up here, but would you read this with me first? It is hard to choose between the two. I want to leave this life and be with Christ, which is much better, but you need me here. I will stay with you to help you grow and have joy in your faith. That could be for us all. There are a lot of people hungry for heaven, maybe don't even know it. But we who can fill up on the gifts of God's heavenly grace are then called to go out, and we're to be expressions of God's own presence, God's living heaven, which is now and in eternity. So keep your lamps trimmed and burning with hope and faith. We're going to sing about hope now.